The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
I was born in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and very early in my life, I think I was a very young teenager, and my dad used to listen to the boxing matches from Madison Square Garden in New York City every Friday night. He would allow me to stay up late enough to watch Earl Cameron, who was a former neighbor of ours, do the national news. But after that, the Northern Messenger came on. And the Northern Messenger was an opportunity for people to send messages to loved ones in the far Arctic of Canada. 21 words or less. It was sent into CBC in Winnipeg, and these messages were beamed over the Sackville transmitters in Sackville, New Brunswick. That intrigued me because we'd hear the messages to people who were in a place that was on the other side of the world, I thought. Sax Harbor or Copper Mine or Pangnirtung. They were so removed from the reality of where I lived in Moose Jaw. And it always intrigued me that the names we used to hear, the odd time we'd hear of an Inuit person's name. But one that always intrigued me was to Gus Dow, somewhere in the Barrens. And that was, where are these places? That was intriguing to me because of the great country that we live in, this Canada, that has the wide open expanse of the north. And so that was part of the reason, but also I had the opportunity to, in my late teens, to meet up with some RCMP, and also I needed a job. So I was intrigued that there was a possibility that I could be stationed in places like Copper Mine or whatever, or even to move it to other parts of Canada. That was a very important thing in those days for transfers, the availability of different parts of Canada to work. The other thing was I always felt that I would like to contribute somehow to people in the community. That was always overriding. And it even has been in retirement as well. But lo and behold, I made an application to the force, and on a very, very, very cold day in December the 18th, in 1955, I walked across the bridge and wondered what on earth I was going to get into, because there had been one of the worst blizzards ever in Saskatchewan that day. And one of our inspectors had perished in the blizzard at North Battleford in that blizzard. He was out on patrol. So my very first job as an unsquatted member was to dig the grave for this officer and dig out the road leading to the cemetery in Regina, just beside the Heritage Centre there. And I watched as the procession came by the frosted window of the old mess hall, as the gun carriage came by with the horse, the riderless horse, and the reversed boots, and I thought, my goodness, this is history in the making. I'm living part of the RCMP history. So that was my very first event in the RCMP. I went through basic training, and in those days we had 11 months of musical ride training, equitation. And one of my instructors was Harry Armstrong. And graduated the following year and was posted to Edmonton, and eventually became a member of the detachment at St. Paul, Alberta. And from there, I became very closely tied in with the Aboriginal community of Saddle Lake. We had a lot of work there, and but I still had that yearning for that northern experience. And Chuck Cripps, one of the members that was on detachment in Edmonton, he was a former Northerner, and he talked me into applying for Northern service. And in those days, you had to have a program at Charles Camsell Hospital to know how to birth babies and look after special medical problems when you went on detachments. So I went immediately to Yellowknife. We had to bypass this program because they needed the members on detachment. So Reg Bowen and I went up, stationed in Yellowknife first off, and eventually got posted to Fort Providence on the Mackenzie River. And I was alone there for a while. Our NCO had to go out on a medical treatment for about 6 months. But then I was posted to Reliance Detachment. Reliance is on the very east arm of Great Slave Lake. And it was set up in 1928 because of the Hornby expedition, the three men that came over from England, and they perished they all starved to death. The first time, really, that the caribou had not gone on their regular cycle through that area. So they all had perished, and the bodies were found by Inuit hunters. And from that point, they decided that it was important that we had a detachment located at Reliance that could look after the barren land area with trappers. So I was posted to Reliance to be in charge, and the plane landed at the little dock there, and all there are is the police buildings, little log buildings, and around the corner 14 Native people lived. But the first person to meet me when I got off that plane was Gus Dow from the early days. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. And so the northern experience out of Reliance was really special for me. We had to use the dog teams. I was one of the last ones to have dog team. I had 42 dogs. We would go on patrol to a place called Snowdrift. It's now called 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡. And that was our patrol cabin, and that's where most of the people lived. But it was a place where there was a weather beacon there to cover that area towards Baker Lake, towards Hudson's Bay. But it was mostly surviving. You had to look after your dogs, you had to feed the dogs. They got trout every day, pretty nice. And then for Christmas that year, the teacher at Snowdrift was aware that there was considerable brewing going on. And so we made a dog patrol. I took 10 dogs in 85 miles away. We landed there very late at night. And there was a rapport that we don't see very often today in the settlements or the areas where we work. It was a very close tie-in with the police. As soon as they knew the police were there, the whole scene changed. And they were very closely tied in with their church too. So we took residents up for the next 2 weeks over the Christmas period. And I remember my mother's church group in Moose Jaw had sent up some parcels for Christmas. And I had thrown them in the carryall before I left Reliance because I wanted to have some kind of celebration at Christmas time over at Snowdrift. And little did I realize that 2 days after I got there, I had a wrap on the log shack that I stayed in. And the children were hollering, "My mother's having a baby, my mother's having a..." Okay, I hadn't had the course in birthing, so what do? Well, you're supposed to boil water. Well, you need string. So I took one of the parcels that had been sent and took the string off and took it over to this little shack that was there. When I entered the shack, it was quite obvious that everybody had everything in hand. And the mother gave birth. And the conditions of living were pretty remote there. They had very poor housing. It was cold, and when I got back to Reliance, I found out that the child had developed pneumonia and had passed away. But it was an experience that I well remember. Another time too, at New Year's, the children came to the door, rapping on the door, that there was a fire. And when I got outside my door, one of the Indian houses was totally engulfed in flames. And in those days, the RCMP were the government of the day for the Northwest Territories was here in Ottawa. So we had to put all the reports in to, say, the Dominion Fire Commissioner. And I told him about this fire, that a little girl, a 9-year-old girl, Celine Nadaway, had saved 4 children from the fire. One of them had crawled under the blanket to get away from the smoke, and she had to actually physically pull him out from the fire. When I went back 2 years ago with my son to just see the settlement again, Fort Reliance, and over in Snowdrift, we took all our pictures back from those days. And I often thought how important it would have been for her to have been recognized for her act of bravery. And of course, I sing at Rideau Hall all the time at the investitures, the bravery awards. They weren't instituted till many years later, but it would have been nice if she could have got something like that. So I inquired at the house, and what happens is you have to have, the award has to be presented within 2 years of the incident happening. So that was out of the question. And while we were standing at the Sacred Assembly and showing our pictures on this 45-gallon drum on the beach, all the tents were located in the trees. My son asked, my dad's always been trying to find this girl that saved the children, and it just so happened that she was standing beside the 45-gallon drum. And so I persevered with that. I thought, it's 52 years later. I'm going to see if I can't find something for her. And I think it's in the works at this present time that the commissioner is going to give a commendation there. I'm really happy about that, because it shows that we're supporting Aboriginal initiatives, and the woman side of things is really important too, because women in those settlements are very, very important. They are the leaders, really. So after Reliance, I closed the detachment in February of that year in 1961, came out and got married, and was posted to Edmonton, then out to Vegeville, which is a Ukrainian community just east of Edmonton. And I became in charge of town detail there. And that was Ukrainian people are really wonderful people in the community. They are very industrious, and I even learned to sing in Ukrainian there. I probably very pathetically, but I did attempt to sing in Ukrainian. I was asked back several times after I got to Ottawa with the band to go back and do their special Christmas program, and was given an award by the people at the Women's Institute for my contribution to the music festival. But after that, I did a lot of singing in the community in addition to my police work, and all of a sudden there's this application comes out for a vocalist with the RCMP band in Ottawa. And I really had not heard about the band. And I don't know whether the guys were trying to say, I think we should try and get rid of Hampson from the detachment. So why don't you apply for this job? You do a lot of singing and stuff. So I applied, and I sent a tape down, and it was recorded on a very out-of-tune piano at the old Ukrainian Hall. And it was material that really today I would never even consider putting on. It was sort of semi-classical because I had had music training in Moose Jaw. And lo and behold, I get this letter that says, here's $10 for the tape, and you're transferred to Ottawa. And I didn't have any interviews or anything. And I thought, God, what have I got myself into here? So the next thing I know, we're having farewell parties, and then January of 1964, I end up in Ottawa in the RCMP concert band. I can honestly say that I was not of the caliber of some of the guys that I worked with. We had the cream of the crop for young musicians in Canada. They were the very best. Our boss was Ted Lytle, and he was a rather severe individual, very traditional in the kind of music he played. But, you know, I seemed to hit it off all right. I fitted in with what they wanted. And over the years, we would do schools and try to open up the doors for recruiting for the RCMP. We did major tours every year to different parts of Canada. We had a cycle that we went on every 3 years. We were away as long as a month at a time. And then in 1968, Ted Lytle retired, and they brought in a young fellow from the United States. Now, this was unfortunate that they didn't promote him, as he was an honest Canadian from Percy Street in Ottawa, but he had gone to the States, as many Canadian musicians do, and made a name for himself. He was the director of music for the United States Herald Trumpets, wrote and performed all the music for John Kennedy's inauguration. And then in his retirement from the Marines, he decided he wanted to come to take over this job that Ted Lytle was leaving. And we had the criticism, oh, why did they get an American to run the RCMP band? Well, he wasn't. But when he arrived, it was Captain Colgate. That's what we called him. He had a smile. And, you know, our RCMP are not supposed to smile. They are rather severe people who you have to obey the law. But he made us, through music, realize that we're just normal people like everybody else. And we like good music, and we like to have fun on stage. That was a bit difficult for certain higher ups in the echelon. They just could not understand that. And but he was a showman, a true showman. From his involvement, one day he called me in the office to say, look, we're doing all these Canadian gigs, and we have music that other people should be hearing too. And this message of the red surge, the Mountie image going out to do specialized music. Why don't you go over to the exposition office with Patrick Reed and see if we can get some kind of international coverage? So I didn't know anything about things like that. And I went over to Coventry Road, and this secretary says, well, Mr. Reed's here if you'd like to see him. Well, how do you talk to somebody that's the head of the Exposition Commission? Anyway, he invited me in, and on his desk was a model of the Expo 86, X68, Expo 68 in San Antonio, Texas. And would you be able to do performances there? Well, yes, we could do anything you want. We did parades, we did concerts in the concert hall with piano concertos, and I mean, our guys could play anything. And we did the official flag raisings for all the nations that were participating. Well, that sort of opened the door, and from that, we got international coverage at Japan in 1970, went to the World's Fair. And the musical ride was also at that thing. They took all the top Canadian performers went over for Canada Day. And our pavilion was one of the most successful. And it really is wonderful when you go away to see Canada so well presented. And we're just sort of the icing on the cake with these uniforms. People know, wherever you are in the world, they know what we represent. And so through our music, we made a lot of new friends over there. We would perform to as many as 25,000 every day on the stadium. And also we did an accompaniment for the National Ballet of Canada, that's another form of music that, oh, how come they can play all that jazz and then they can go and do this thing too? And I remember George Brough, the music director for the National Ballet, was very amazed at how well we could play the music for the National Ballet. So that, and then we were at the World's Fair in Montreal, but latterly in Brisbane, Australia, and also in Vancouver. We were at Vancouver 4 times in '86. And with royalty, I remember coming over the day that Charles and Diana were on the ship Queen of the North. And the Queen of the North was one of the big BC ferry operations, and we were coming into Vancouver Harbor. We'd just come under the Lionsgate Bridge, and the fireboat was spewing water out, and all of a sudden a gust of wind came up, and the prince and princess were in this glass case just in front of us, and the wind came up, and the music decided to go out to a watery grave in the ocean. And she turned around, got a real charge out of that. She was very relaxed, and she got a good laugh. And so I've had very good fortune in actually being presented to the Queen on many times, and also I did a gala at the National Art Center for the Duke of York and his wife. So the music was able to open many, many doors. We would go to, and I remember a visit to Halifax. We went into a school, and the corporal that was doing the drug presentation was really apprehensive, but how many kids am I going to have coming over to see this display that I've worked so hard getting ready? And you know, after our music was presented in the auditoriums, they were just flocking out there asking all kinds of questions. So music is a vehicle that I don't think we really understand. And of course, we went to the States an awful lot on tours, international things. We did a lot of, as a result of Bram's involvement with the band, we did a lot of TV shows that were broadcast nationally. I was asked to go down early to Sydney to do a photo shoot because we had a concert coming up in Sydney. And at the airport terminal, I'm waiting for my luggage on the carousel. And the guy standing beside me, I recognized him. And I'm a real promoter of my hometown of Moose Jaw. I'm always telling people, they say, where are you from? And okay, Moose Jaw. So this guy's standing beside me at this carousel. And I said, excuse me, aren't you from Moose Jaw? And he looked at me and he said, well, yes, I am. And it was Art Linkletter. And he was the chef de mission for the American Pavilion at Brisbane. You know, some of the things that I remember mostly about the band was to go into the small settlements. We would pack the luggage into a twin otter, put the guys in the other twin otter, and we'd head north. And you go into these Inuit communities, and they've never seen things like this. They've never seen a trumpet being played. Women nursing babies in their amities. It may have been special for them, but it certainly was special for us because we were reaching people who maybe have heard music for the first time. And it was also good for me because it gave me a chance to get back north. And I remember going back to Snowdrift. Can you believe going back to Snowdrift with all these musicians? And it's a tiny little settlement. It's called Lutzelkena. We get off the plane. It is cold. It must have been 45 below. But they were going to do something special. There was the largest building in the settlement, and it was really a large house. They decided to paint it, the interior, for our arrival. They wanted to really put on the dog for the RCMP band. But they should not have done it on the morning of the concert because the turquoise and pink paint was still wet. And we got stuck to the floor as we were coming in to do the concert. And where we sat down, fortunately the chairs weren't painted, but it was a unique experience. And the little log shack that I used to live in now became a cell for the detachment. So it was very special for me to go back. We used to get kids writing to us for shoulder flashes and things like that, and or programs, or if we could send something out like a tape or a CD. So I got a letter from this young fellow in Port Alberni, BC, and he was handicapped. I didn't know how badly handicapped he was, but he had a collection and he wanted some RCMP memorabilia. So I got some stuff ready for him, and then I thought, you know, we're going out to Vancouver for the World's Fair in '86, and we were out there 4 times, but one time we were going to be there for Canada Day, and the Prince and Princess were going to be there. And so how could we make this even more important to this young kid? So I phoned the detachment to Port Alberni. It just turned out that it was a guy I was stationed with in the north in Yellowknife many years before. And he told me about the family. They just had the one child. He was spinal bifida very, very badly. And he was confined to an electronic wheelchair. So I said, well, what are the possibilities of getting him to come over and maybe we could have him conduct the band on Canada Day? And so it all worked out. The detachment made all the arrangements. They paid the bills for the family. The mother, father, and grandmother came over with him. And on Canada Day at noon hour at the big plaza at the World's Fair, he was wheeled up the ramp and stood in front of, or he didn't stand, he was in his wheelchair and conducted the RCMP band for O Canada. It was very, very special. And those don't happen very often. And I can just imagine him going back. I don't know if he's still alive even, but I used to write to him years after that, and that was such a big thing for them. You know, he's a kid that he didn't have much in life. And so to be able to say he conducted the world famous RCMP concert band, that was pretty nice for that kid. So, you know, the idea of sending the goodwill message from Canada has been uppermost always, always. I guess I'm a flag waver. And you can't do anything better in being in a uniform of the Mounted Police. It's so recognizable. You don't have to have any banner to say that you're from Canada. They know exactly what you are.